The morning rain had just begun to fade, leaving behind a shimmering sheen on the quiet streets. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and the gentle hum of distant life awakening. Somewhere nearby, the faint echo of footsteps on wet pavement echoed like a heartbeat, steady and relentless. It was an ordinary day cloaked in the hush of dawn, yet beneath that tranquil surface, something fragile was about to fracture, something unseen, yet deeply felt. In the small, humble apartment, Clara moved with a nervous energy. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her new necklace, a delicate chain with a tiny, silver pendant that caught the morning light. It was a gift from her grandmother, a symbol of resilience wrapped in the simplicity of everyday life. She looked in the mirror, her reflection a quiet testament to her hopes and fears, a mirror that held the weight of unspoken stories. Today, she was going to work in her modest dress, her heart pounding softly like the rain that had just ceased, an echo of vulnerability and strength intertwined. The room was silent except for the faint whisper of her breath and the distant sound of rain droplets hanging from the eaves. Clara's heartbeat was a slow, steady rhythm, an unspoken prayer, a fragile affirmation of her worth. Her fingers brushed the necklace again, as if seeking reassurance, as if the tiny pendant could somehow carry her worries away. Today was supposed to be simple, a day like any other. Yet, in the quiet corners of her mind, a whisper of doubt fluttered. What if someone noticed? What if the necklace, a symbol of her grandmother's love, became a target of suspicion? Then, suddenly, a loud voice shattered the calm. It cut through the silence like a blade, sharp, unexpected. The neighbor's shout rang out, raw and urgent, piercing the morning air. "That belongs to my mom!" The words echoed through the thin walls, bouncing off the cracked paint and into Clara's ears. Her heart stuttered, a jolt of fear racing through her veins as if the very ground beneath her had shifted. The world seemed to pause, a breath held in suspense, before the rain's gentle whisper resumed, almost as if mocking the chaos. In that moment, everything blurred, the innocence of her quiet morning, the soft shimmer of her necklace, the fragile hope she carried. Clara stood frozen, caught between vulnerability and defiance, her mind racing through memories and fears. The necklace, once a symbol of love and resilience, now felt like a fragile thread hanging by a whisper of trust. Her hands clenched the fabric of her dress, her eyes searching for a silent answer in the storm of voices and shadows. And yet, amid the chaos, a quiet resolve began to bloom. A reminder that even in the face of accusations and doubts, her story was her own. A story woven with humility, strength, and the silent promise that no matter what the world shouted, she would carry herself with dignity. Because sometimes, the smallest things, like a humble necklace, hold the greatest stories, waiting for their moment to shine. And in that moment, Clara realized, her journey was just beginning. Clara's mornings had become a quiet ritual of silence and shadows. The small apartment she called home felt heavier with each passing day, the walls echoing with memories she couldn't quite shake. Her eyes often lingered on the faded photographs lined up on the shelf, smiles frozen in time, moments of laughter now tinged with the ache of absence. Her grandmother's necklace, her only remaining link to a past filled with warmth and stories, rested gently around her neck. It was a fragile comfort, a whisper of love that refused to fade, even as grief lingered like a stubborn stain in her heart. She remembered the days when her world felt whole, when her mother's voice would fill the room, warm and reassuring, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. But those days had slipped away, leaving behind a hollow ache that settled deep within her chest. She'd lost her mother years ago, the illness stealing her quietly, leaving behind an empty space that no amount of time could fully fill. Now she moved through her days feeling like a ghost, present, yet invisible in her own life. Every step was a quiet struggle to hold herself together, to pretend she was fine when inside, her heart was heavy with the weight of loss. Her eyes often flickered with tears she refused to shed in front of others, because vulnerability felt like a weakness she couldn't afford. The world had already taken so much from her, her dreams, her sense of security, her sense of belonging. She had built walls to protect herself from the pain, but inside she was fragile, like a delicate glass ornament trembling with the slightest breeze. The necklace, her grandmother's gift, was more than jewelry. It was a shield, a whisper of hope, a reminder that love existed beyond loss. Yet, even that fragile piece sometimes felt like a burden, another thing to defend, another thing to lose. As she prepared for her day, her fingers brushed the chain absent-mindedly, feeling the cool metal against her skin. Her reflection in the mirror showed someone worn yet resilient, eyes that carried stories of heartbreak, of quiet suffering, of perseverance in the shadows. She longed for connection, for someone to see her not as a broken woman but as a survivor. But trust was a fragile thing, and the wounds of rejection ran deep. She often wondered if anyone truly saw her beneath the layers of pain she wore like armor. In the stillness of that morning, as the rain had finally stopped, Clara felt the quiet ache of loneliness settle over her once again. Her heart was a small, battered vessel, holding on to hope with trembling hands. She knew she was fragile, an open wound masked by a gentle smile, a silent prayer for understanding. And as she stepped out into the world, she carried that vulnerability like a secret, quietly hoping that someday, someone would see her not just for her pain but for the strength she fought to find every day. Her story was written in quiet moments, in tears hidden behind a brave face, in the fragile shimmer of her necklace, a testament to the resilience that still flickered inside her, waiting for its turn to shine. And perhaps, in the gentle unfolding of trust, she would find a way to heal, one small step at a time. The street was quiet now, the rain having washed away the last traces of storm, leaving everything glistening and still. From her window, Clara watched the world slowly waking up, the gentle hum of life returning with a soft, steady rhythm. Somewhere nearby, a child's distant laughter mingled with the faint rustle of leaves, a fragile reminder of innocence amid the quiet struggle of daily life. As she lingered by the window, her gaze drifted to the narrow alley where a figure was slowly making their way down the sidewalk, an older man, weathered by time and hard work, with a face etched with lines that told stories of both hardship and kindness. He carried a small bag, the weight of it seeming almost like a burden he bore without complaint. His steps were hesitant, uneven at times, as if the ground beneath him was uncertain, yet there was a quiet persistence in his movement. He paused near her building, then looked up, eyes catching hers through the window. It was a brief, unspoken moment, an exchange of understanding between strangers who shared the silent language of resilience. Clara's heart fluttered unexpectedly at the simple act of recognition, feeling the weight of her own vulnerability ripple through her like a faint tremor. She wondered about his story, what had brought him here, what burdens he carried beneath that weathered face. His presence was unremarkable in the grand scheme of things, yet in that fleeting second, it felt like a tiny crack in the wall she'd built around herself, a reminder that even the smallest acts of being seen matter. He tipped his head slightly, almost as if acknowledging her, then turned away, moving toward a corner store with a slow, deliberate pace. Clara watched him disappear into the shop, her mind drifting into a quiet reflection. That small gesture, his glance, his hesitant pause, was enough to stir a flicker of something unfamiliar inside her. It was not grand or dramatic, just a simple act of human recognition, but it lingered long after he was gone, like the faint echo of a melody that refuses to fade. Later, as she stepped outside to start her day, the neighborhood carried on around her, people rushing past with purpose, faces cloaked in their own struggles. She carried the memory of that quiet moment, feeling it settle gently in her chest. Sometimes, kindness came softly, like a whisper in the wind, nothing large or overwhelming, just a glance, a nod, a gentle acknowledgement of shared existence. She didn't know much about the man, nor did she need to. What mattered was that in his imperfect, hesitant way, he had reached out without words, reminding her that human connection often begins in the smallest acts, those that seem insignificant, yet hold the power to ignite hope. As Clara paused to gather herself, she noticed the faintest shimmer of sunlight breaking through the clouds, casting a delicate glow over the street. It was as if the world was offering her a quiet invitation, to look beyond her pain, to see the beauty in imperfect moments, in shared glances and gentle acts. Her journey was still unfolding, fragile and uncertain, but deep down, she felt the faint promise of something new. Sometimes, healing begins with a simple act, an unspoken gesture, a kind glance, and in that quiet space, hope begins to take root once more. Days drifted into each other, each one a quiet testament to endurance and small acts of kindness that refused to be ignored. Clara's mornings still carried the weight of her loneliness, but gradually, subtle shifts began to take shape within her routine. The neighbor, whose name she learned was Mr. Harris, became a quiet fixture in her days, not through grand gestures but through gentle, unspoken offerings. One morning, as she stepped outside clutching her bag, she noticed him waiting near the doorway of his house, a small, lopsided smile on his weathered face. Without words, he held out a battered umbrella, its fabric faded but sturdy. She hesitated, then nodded quietly, accepting it. The rain was heavy that day, and as she stepped into the shelter of the umbrella, she felt an unexpected wave of gratitude, an acknowledgement that she was seen, even in her vulnerability. The umbrella shielded her from the storm, but more than that, it created a fragile bridge between two strangers, an unspoken understanding that she was not alone. Later, when their paths crossed again, Mr. Harris offered her a small bag of homemade bread, wrapped in a worn cloth. She accepted with a soft smile, surprised by the gesture's simplicity yet touched by its sincerity. Each day, these small exchanges, sharing food, a quick glance, a nod of understanding, began to carve out a fragile space where loneliness once dwelled. They weren't words of deep friendship, but they were enough to break the silence, enough to remind her that kindness often resides in small, unnoticed acts. One chilly evening, as Clara hurried home, the wind swirling around her like a restless spirit, Mr. Harris appeared beside her, holding out an extra scarf. It was thick and warm, a bit too big for her, but she wrapped it around her shoulders without question. The gesture was simple, yet it made her feel protected, as if wrapped in invisible layers of care. It was as if, in this moment, her loneliness was being gently dismantled, piece by piece, by unassuming acts that spoke of quiet solidarity. Weeks passed, and with each passing day, their interactions grew softer, offering her a seat on a park bench when she looked weary, sharing a cup of tea on a cold afternoon, or simply walking beside her in silence, the kind that doesn't demand words but gently affirms presence. Clara's heart, which had long been guarded behind walls of grief and doubt, began to crack open, slowly allowing fragments of trust and hope to seep through. She realized that these gestures, so small they seemed insignificant, were actually building a fragile mosaic of connection. In a world that often felt overwhelming and indifferent, these acts became her quiet sanctuary, whispering that she was not invisible, that her pain and resilience mattered in the simple kindness of others. Each shared moment felt like a small thread weaving her into the fabric of the neighborhood, fragile but unbreakable. Yet, beneath the calm surface, an undercurrent of tension was stirring. The familiar peace was about to be challenged by shadows she hadn't yet seen. The gentle trust she was painstakingly rebuilding might soon face a test, something beyond her control, threatening to unravel the fragile bonds she had begun to forge. But for now, in the soft glow of these small acts, she found a glimpse of hope. Hope that even in the face of mounting storms, kindness could be a lighthouse guiding her through the darkness, one delicate beam at a time. As she looked at the horizon, tinged with the faintest streak of dawn, Clara felt the stirrings of resilience take root. The journey ahead was uncertain, but she carried within her the quiet knowledge that sometimes, the smallest gestures are the most profound, reminding us that even amid chaos, love and hope can blossom quietly, patiently, in the spaces between words. A thick fog had settled over the neighborhood that day, wrapping everything in a muted, gray silence that felt heavier than usual. The air was thick with whispers and unseen eyes watching from behind curtains, from alleyways, from the corners of every street. Clara had started her morning with a fragile hope, clutching her small bag as she stepped out, feeling the weight of her necklace beneath her blouse, her only piece of her grandmother's love, a silent anchor. But as she reached the sidewalk, her breath caught in her throat. There, across the street, a small crowd had gathered, their faces familiar yet clouded with suspicion. Her heart pounded like a drum in her chest as she caught sight of her mother's name whispered among hushed voices, gossip swirling with venom, spreading like wildfire. Rumors had begun to crawl through the community, fed by a few sharp words, a misunderstanding, or perhaps malice cloaked in concern. Someone had seen her with the necklace, and soon, her quiet world was unraveling. The accusations flew like shards of glass, her modest choices, her humble life, her very integrity now under assault. The neighbor's voice, which once held a gentle familiarity, now boomed across the street, loud and unforgiving. "That belongs to my mom!" The words cut through the air like a dagger, leaving a trail of shock and disbelief in their wake. Clara's knees felt weak, her face burning with shame and fear. All the things she had tried to build, her dignity, her fragile trust, were suddenly threatened. The community's judgment was swift, sharp, and unrelenting. Whispers turned into pointed glances, sidelong looks that felt like accusations. She thought of her grandmother's necklace, the small piece of her past that she carried close to her heart, now seen as an object of suspicion. Her mind spiraled into chaos. What if they took it away? What if they judged her for daring to hold on to a piece of her history, her identity? Tears prickled beneath her eyelids, but she fought to keep them hidden. Her hands clenched tightly into fists, trembling with the storm of emotion inside. She wanted to disappear, to run away from the stares and whispers, to hide from the judgment that was crushing her fragile spirit. She looked to her side, searching for any sign of support, any reassurance that she wasn't alone in her pain. That's when she saw him, her neighbor, Mr. Harris, standing a few steps away, his face etched with concern, yet helpless in the face of the crowd. His eyes met hers for a fleeting moment, silently offering a kind of quiet defiance against the wave of hostility, but he did not speak. The wind carried the murmurs, carrying her fears like leaves in a storm. Her heart was a fragile vessel, trembling on the verge of shattering, yet somewhere deep within, a small ember of hope flickered, trying to stay alive. Perhaps it was the way he looked at her, without judgment, without condemnation, just a simple acknowledgement of her pain. That unspoken support, so small in the grand scheme, felt like a fragile lifeline. She knew this was only the beginning of a storm that could threaten everything: her reputation, her peace, her fragile bonds. But even amidst the chaos, her gaze lingered on Mr. Harris. The external world was demanding her to conform, to hide, to be silent. Yet, deep inside, she wondered if her quiet resilience could still find a way to survive. Maybe, just maybe, the smallest act of kindness, an understanding glance, a steady presence, could be enough to hold her together when everything else was falling apart. As the crowd's murmurs faded into the background, Clara took a shaky breath, feeling the weight of the external obstacle pressing down on her. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with shadows and doubt, but she clung to the faint hope that even in the darkest storms, a single spark of loyalty and love could illuminate a path through the chaos. The question lingered: how much more could she withstand before her fragile trust shattered forever? And yet, in this moment of doubt, she knew she wasn't truly alone. Mr. Harris stood quietly, his figure a steady presence amidst the swirling storm of whispers and judgment. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he kept his eyes fixed on Clara, offering her a silent reassurance that needed no words. His stance was firm, but not aggressive, simply present. It was as if he had chosen to be a quiet anchor in the chaos, knowing that sometimes, the most powerful support was in just being there. He shifted slightly, adjusting his position to block some of the sharp glances coming from the crowd, as if his mere presence could shield her from the worst of their scrutiny. As the murmurs around them grew louder, he remained rooted. His hands stayed relaxed at his sides, showing no signs of agitation or confrontation, only unwavering loyalty that spoke in its silence. The neighborhood had always known him as a man of quiet strength, a person who listened more than he spoke, who watched over his community with a gentle but firm watchfulness. Today was no different. His eyes flickered briefly to her, offering a small but meaningful connection, an unspoken message that she wasn't alone, that someone cared in a way that words could never fully capture. When a few neighbors tried to approach, whispering accusations or casting sideways glances. Mr. Harris subtly moved to stand a little closer to Clara, creating a subtle barrier that said, "She is under my watch." Not in a threatening way, but as a testament to his loyalty. He did not raise his voice, nor did he confront anyone directly. Instead, he simply stayed, his presence a quiet fortress. It was enough to make her feel less exposed, less vulnerable, like a fragile flower held gently amid a storm, supported by the unseen strength of someone who refused to let her fall. Clara's eyes flickered to him, and she saw the steady gaze in his eyes, calm, unwavering, full of a kind of human kindness that didn't need grand gestures. It was raw and real, rooted in years of knowing the value of quiet loyalty. Her breath, which had been ragged and uneven, grew steadier. She felt her trembling hands slow their shaking, the tightness in her chest easing just a little. In that moment, she realized that support didn't have to come with grand speeches or heroic acts. Sometimes, it was simply being present, unwavering, and showing up day after day, just like Mr. Harris was doing now. He kept his eyes on her, his silence a steady reassurance that she didn't have to face this storm alone. When her gaze finally met his, she found a quiet strength there, an affirmation that even in the face of community judgment and unfounded accusations, loyalty could be a soft but unbreakable thread woven into the fabric of her life. His presence, simple yet profound, reminded her that true support was human, imperfect, and rooted in understanding rather than rescue. As the crowd's murmurs started to die down, Mr. Harris took a small step back, giving her space to breathe, to gather herself. His gesture was subtle but meaningful, a quiet promise that he would stay near her, at least for now, standing firm against the shadows of doubt. The wind stirred the leaves, casting fleeting shadows that danced around them, as if nature itself was whispering a lullaby of resilience. In the quiet that followed, Clara felt a flicker of something new, a fragile, yet growing belief that even in the darkest moments, there could be a steadfast presence that didn't waver. The world around might threaten to drown her in its judgments, but here, in this shared silence, she discovered a piece of her own strength, a strength rooted in human loyalty, in quiet perseverance. She knew that her journey was far from over, but with Mr. Harris by her side, she could feel the first hints of inner resilience stirring beneath her trembling exterior. And as she looked out at the horizon, tinged with the golden light of late afternoon, she understood, sometimes, the greatest support isn't in words or grand gestures, but in the simple act of standing firm, like a lighthouse casting its glow amid the stormy sea. And perhaps, in that quiet steadfastness, she could find her way toward a dawn of new hope. The days that followed felt softer, tinged with a quiet resilience Clara hadn't known she possessed. The storm of gossip and suspicion hadn't completely faded, but within her, something had shifted. The weight of the accusations, the fear of losing her dignity, no longer held her captive in the same way. Instead, she began to see herself through a different lens, one that wasn't defined by others' judgments, but by her own quiet truths. She found herself waking up a little earlier each morning, not out of obligation, but driven by a gentle curiosity about her own potential. She dusted off her old sketchbook from years ago, the pages filled with dreams she had shelved away, visions of creating, of teaching, of inspiring others to see their worth beyond appearances or material possessions. The act of holding a pencil again felt like reclaiming a part of herself that had been lost in the chaos. Her smile returned gradually, soft but genuine, like a sunrise after a long, dark night. She began to notice the small things, the way the sunlight filtered through her window, casting warm patterns on the wall, the way her hands felt steadier as she traced her sketches, the gentle hum of her favorite song that she played softly while working. Each moment was a small affirmation that her worth was rooted deep within, unshaken by external voices or fleeting judgments. She started to share her stories with a few neighbors, not to seek validation, but to connect, bit by bit, piece by piece, reminding herself that her voice mattered. In those conversations, she realized that her experiences, her struggles, and her hopes had become her quiet strength. She no longer needed to hide behind her modest exterior. Instead, she used her voice to inspire others who felt silenced or overlooked. Some days she would help a neighbor with their garden, offering gentle advice that came from her own journey of healing. Other days she would sit with her sketchbook, dreaming of a small workshop, perhaps teaching children or young women how to find their own inner light through art. This purpose, once buried under waves of doubt, now blossomed quietly, illuminating her days with renewed hope. She understood that healing wasn't about erasing the past but about integrating it into her present, making her more compassionate, more patient, more aware of her own resilience. Her necklace, the symbol of her grandmother's love, still rested around her neck, but now it carried a different meaning. It was no longer a fragile token under attack, but a testament to her strength, an emblem of the quiet battles she had fought and won within herself. One evening, as she sat on her small balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and lavender, Clara felt a gentle warmth bloom inside her. It was a feeling of acceptance, of knowing that her worth was not determined by others' opinions but by her own understanding of who she was. She closed her eyes briefly, feeling the soft hum of hope in her chest, like a lullaby whispering that her journey was only just beginning. The world might still have its shadows, but she had found a light within, steadfast and true. She knew that her story was far from over, that her voice could carry beyond her quiet corner of the world, inspiring others to see their own worth. And as she opened her eyes again, she saw the horizon stretching endlessly before her, an invitation to dream anew, to create anew, to embrace the purpose that had always been waiting inside her. Her heart, once fragile and trembling, now beat with a steady rhythm, an anthem of quiet courage and hope. The journey ahead might still hold challenges, but she had discovered that true strength lies not in rescue, but in the unwavering belief that she was enough, just as she was. And in that realization, she found the courage to step forward, ready to face whatever new dawn awaited. The town square was alive with a gentle buzz that afternoon, a tapestry of faces gathered beneath the sprawling branches of old oak trees. Flags fluttered softly in the breeze, and a makeshift stage stood at the center, simple, yet enough to hold the weight of what was about to unfold. Clara, dressed modestly but with a quiet confidence, stepped onto the stage, clutching her small clutch, her heart pounding but her resolve steady. The sun cast a golden glow over her shoulders, illuminating the necklace that rested against her collarbone, a symbol of her resilience, her roots, and her newfound purpose. She took a deep breath, feeling the eyes of her neighbors, her friends, her community settle on her, some with curiosity, others with silent expectation. Today was the day she had imagined in her quiet moments of hope, but never thought she'd have to face in such a public way. As she looked out at the faces before her, she remembered all the whispers, the accusations, the fears she had clung to. But standing here now, she knew that her worth was rooted in her truth, not in the shadows cast by suspicion. With a voice clear and steady, she began to speak, not just to the crowd, but to herself. "This necklace," she said softly, lifting her chin, "has been with me through every storm. It's a reminder that even in the darkest times, there is something within us that can shine, something unbreakable. I've learned that my value isn't in what others say I am or what they think I hold. It's in who I am, my dreams, my struggles, my strength, and my hope for a better tomorrow." Her words, humble yet powerful, seemed to ripple through the crowd like a gentle wave. She paused, her eyes searching for familiar faces, for anyone who might understand. Some nodded quietly, others looked away, perhaps uncomfortable with the truth being laid bare. But she pressed on. "I stand here today not just to tell my story, but to remind us all that no matter how loud the voices of doubt or fear, we have the power to define ourselves. To hold on to what is true, our dignity, our hope, our purpose." A collective breath seemed to hold in the crowd, the silence thick with emotion. Then, from the back of the crowd, a slow applause began, soft at first, then growing into a gentle, steady rhythm. It was not a roar of praise, but a collective acknowledgement, an acceptance of her courage, her truth, her resilience. Faces that once held suspicion now looked at her with new eyes, seeing her not as a symbol of shame, but as a testament to quiet strength. A woman who dared to stand tall in her truth, even when the world tried to drown her out. Clara's eyes shimmered with tears, part relief, part gratitude, as she realized that her vulnerability, her honesty, had begun to bridge the gap between her and her community. The applause continued, not to erase the past, but to honor her courage to face it head-on. The sun dipped lower, casting a warm glow over the gathering, a golden promise that even in the face of fear, there was hope. Her voice, now steady and filled with grace, rang out again. Let us remember that our worth is not measured by others' judgments, but by our own courage to be true to ourselves. Today, I choose to stand proud, not in spite of my fears, but because I have faced them. As she stepped down from the stage, the crowd parted gently, welcoming her back into their midst with a newfound respect. The community's eyes, once filled with skepticism, now shimmered with understanding. Clara's journey from fear to acceptance had woven a tapestry of resilience that would stay with them all. The sun's final rays painted the sky in hues of amber and violet, a poetic reminder that even in the shadows of doubt, there is light, resilient, enduring, and ever bright. And as she moved among her neighbors, a quiet call echoed in her heart, that each of us, in our own time, can find the courage to stand in the fullness of our truth, and in doing so, inspire others to do the same. In the quiet hush that followed the community gathering, a gentle, hesitant step approached Clara from the side. It was her grandmother, her eyes soft but carrying the weight of unspoken words. The older woman's hands trembled slightly as she reached out, her fingers brushing lightly against Clara's arm. For a moment neither spoke, the air thick with memories, both the pain of past misunderstandings and the hope of something new blooming between them. Then, her grandmother's voice broke softly, trembling with emotion. "Clara," she said, "I was wrong." Those words hung in the air, fragile yet profound. Clara looked into her grandmother's eyes, searching for the truth behind the apology, the sincerity that had been buried beneath years of worry and silence. "Grandma?" she whispered, her voice catching. "What do you mean?" Her grandmother's gaze softened further, and she took a step closer, her hands gently holding Clara's. "When I saw you that day, with your necklace, I was afraid," she admitted. "Afraid of what it meant, afraid of losing you or what people might say. I let my fears blind me, and I didn't see the strength you carried inside. I judged you without understanding the woman you are, brave, honest, full of hope. I was wrong to doubt you, to fear for you, instead of standing with you." A tear slipped down her grandmother's cheek, and Clara felt her own eyes welling with tears of relief and forgiveness. "It hurt," her grandmother continued, "to see you misunderstood, to see you hurt by the words of others, especially when I should have been your refuge. I see now that your courage is a gift, not a burden. And I am so proud of you, more than words can say." Clara stepped closer, her voice trembling as she reached out to wipe away her grandmother's tear. "It's okay, Grandma," she whispered. "I needed you to see me, not as someone to be judged, but as someone who wants to be loved and understood for who she truly is. That's all I ever wanted." In that moment, something old and deep shifted between them. The years of silence, suspicion, and worry dissolved into a quiet understanding. Her grandmother's face crumpled softly, and she pulled Clara into a gentle embrace, holding her tightly, as if to gather all the pain and forgiveness into one sacred moment. "I forgive you," she whispered into Clara's hair. "And I promise to listen better, to love more openly. You've shown me what true strength looks like, and I am grateful for the chance to learn from you, to walk this path together, hand in hand, with no more fear between us." As they held each other, the sun dipped lower behind the trees, casting a warm amber glow over the scene, a poetic reminder that even the deepest wounds can heal with patience, understanding, and love. The air was filled with a gentle sense of renewal, a quiet promise that redemption is born not from grand gestures, but from small acts of honesty and forgiveness that grow slowly and naturally. Clara's heart felt lighter than it had in years, her spirit lifted by her grandmother's words. She knew that this moment, fragile yet profound, was a turning point, an act of grace that would ripple outward, healing not just their bond but perhaps sowing seeds of hope in others as well. Together, they stood beneath the fading light, two souls finally reunited in truth, their shadows merging into one, a testament to resilience, forgiveness, and the quiet power of love. And in that peaceful ending, a gentle call echoed, reminding all that true redemption begins with a single act of courage, a willingness to listen, and the unwavering belief that even the deepest scars can transform into sources of strength. Like the last light of day shimmering over still waters, our hearts can find peace when we choose understanding over fear, and love over judgment. As the first light of dawn stretched across the horizon, the sky transformed into a canvas of soft pinks and gentle oranges, whispering promises of renewal and hope. The quiet of the morning was broken only by the distant song of a thrush, its melody weaving through the stillness like a delicate thread connecting yesterday's wounds to today's healing. Clara stood outside her modest home, the necklace resting softly against her collarbone, catching the first rays of sunlight as if holding a secret that only the dawn could reveal. The stars, still faintly shimmering in the darkened sky, seemed to lean closer, as if bearing witness to a quiet victory, the kind that grows slowly, rooted in patience, understanding, and love's gentle persistence. In that silence, she felt the weight of her journey settle into a peaceful stillness. It was not a grand epiphany, nor a sudden burst of magic, but a quiet affirmation that love, in all its forms, is the truest proof that no one is truly alone. Even in the shadows of doubt and fear, there is a light, sometimes flickering, sometimes steady, that guides us back to ourselves and to each other. The necklace, once a symbol of resistance, now shimmered softly in the morning sun, a reminder that strength is often found in the smallest acts, a word, a gesture, a moment of truth. The world was waking up around her, the rustling leaves, the distant hum of life stirring to action. Yet, in this tranquil pause, she understood that life's beauty lies in these quiet, unspoken moments. When hearts are opened, wounds begin to mend, and hope blooms in the gentle space between darkness and dawn. The sky continued to brighten, stars fading into the awakening sky, like memories dissolving into the promise of a new day. Nature's silent symphony played out in the rustling of trees and the blooming of flowers, each petal unfolding with patience, each leaf whispering stories of resilience. Love, she realized, is not a fleeting miracle, but a steady flame, fueled by courage, nurtured by understanding, and sustained by the simple act of showing up, day after day. It is in these moments, beneath the vastness of the universe, that we come to see our shared humanity, that no matter how small our voices, they can echo across the cosmos, reminding us that we are never truly alone. We are all connected by threads of hope, woven through the fabric of our lives, shining brightest in the quiet acts of kindness and acceptance. As the sun climbed higher, casting golden hues across the landscape, Clara felt a gentle reassurance settle within her, a knowing that her story, like the dawn, was part of a larger cycle of renewal and grace. The stars, now retreating into the vastness of space, left behind a silent promise that even in the darkest nights, there is light waiting to be found, guiding us toward healing and new beginnings. And so, with a quiet breath, she turned toward her day, carrying the quiet strength of love's unspoken power. Her journey was not over, but in this moment, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be, held by the universe's gentle embrace. A reminder that love's true magic is simply the proof that none of us are alone in this vast, beautiful world. Let this be a reminder for us all, in the small acts of kindness, in the honest words, and in the quiet understanding, we find the true magic of connection. If this story touched your heart, like the dawn touches the earth, please like, subscribe, and share. Because in sharing hope, we ignite the light that can guide others toward their own dawn, where love and understanding bloom eternal.